Pode ser o Grupo Corpo ou a Companhia de Dança do Pantanal. Museu de Arte Moderna de São Paulo ou Arte em Cores. Filarmônica de Minas Gerais ou Programa Vale Música. Restauração do Museu Nacional ou da Cripta da Basílica de Nazaré. Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. Dos projetos que todo mundo já conhece, até aqueles projetos que todo mundo precisa conhecer. A cultura brasileira tem o nosso apoio. É valorizando essa cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
A sustentabilidade de um ecossistema é construída por muitas mãos. Ela passa pela preservação e cuidado com o meio ambiente, pela cultura, economia, inclusão social, no acesso à saúde e diversas outras áreas. Viu só? Existe um grande universo pertinho de nós e a eletronuclear ajuda a cuidar dele. Você vem com a gente?
Olha, meu olhar para esse ponto é, primeiro, que o centro da Flip precisa ser, independente de qualquer coisa, o livro. O centro da Flip precisa ser a literatura, precisa ser esse objeto histórico chamado livro. Então, em linhas gerais, eu penso que os jovens hoje em dia estão muito antenados nessa coisa da tecnologia, isso é fato, eu me coloco nesse meio porque ainda estou dentro da classificação de juventude com 29 anos. Então a gente está muito ligado nesse meio e eu acho que é possível cruzar o tradicional, o livro e a produção digital, a comunicação por meio das mídias digitais. Eu acho que tem sido feito isso. Eu acho que a Flip proporciona isso em diferentes setores dela, né? Então, é mesmo de reconhecer o espaço, reconhecer os agentes e poder fazer a partir daí um trabalho de reconhecimento de território, de fortalecimento do outro e de si, sabe? Então, eu acho que o meu olhar para a comunicação jovem e o papel da Flip nisso, ela está aí nesse caminho. Vai ter livro em 2050. Vai ter livro em 2050. Tem que ter. tem que ter livro em 2050. Então, falaram que não ia ter rádio, falaram que não ia ter televisão, falaram que não ia ter jornal impresso. E todos esses meios de comunicação, todos esses veículos, eles estão aí. E o livro não vai ser diferente. Vai ser segmentado, talvez vai ter outras formas de consumo, mas ele estará lá. E é papel importante da Flip se manter relevante como ela se manteve até então, para fortalecer ainda mais no cenário nacional essa compreensão de que o livro precisa se manter vivo até 2050, se manter vivo até para além de 2050.
Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade. Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 21ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei de Incentivo à Cultura, Lei Rouanet, PRONAC 231427, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiência física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Caixa. Patrocínio Prata, O Globo, Mac Imóveis e Sebrae. Patrocínio Bronze, Globo Livros e Eletronuclear. Parceria institucional Sesc. Prefeitura de Paraty, Embratur e Museu do Território. É uma concepção, Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Boa tarde. Nossa, essa mesa...
Good afternoon. Wow. Wow, what a beautiful audience. Yes, we have rain now to keep temperature down. So we have this table now, a half dark room, and my name is Milena Brito. And so just so you know, all of the titles of the sessions are from Pagu Works, and a half dark room is a title that we thought of with those polyphonic experiences and the experiences that these authors bring to us to reflect on their experience in the world and their experience with themselves. So bringing this to our patriarchal context, the context of violence, and so there is horror and fear spreading pathways of understanding inside ourselves and outside. So Stephanie Borges is going to be the mediator in this conversation. Thank you very much, and I wish you an excellent session. Hello everyone. I would now like to call our guests Mónica Ojeda and Alana Portero. Mónica Ojeda is the author of poetry, short stories, and romance books. She has published La Desfiguración, Nefando, Mandíbula, and other, La Historia de la Leche, the story of milk, and she's launching at FIUP the short stories book Voladores. And Alana Portero has a diploma in journalism, and by vocation she is a writer, screenwriter, and co-founder of the Striga Theater company, and she writes about feminist and LGBTQAI plus activism and for different magazines in Europe. And she has also a website, Patrio-Alana Portero, and she's launching her first romance, Mau Hábito, Bad Habits in a free translation. So I would like to remind you that after this conversation, the authors will be autographing their book at the tent on the square at the library. And you can also ask questions by raising your hand and asking for a piece of paper on which you can write down your questions. And I also remind you that if you have no questions, I will have. So we are here in our half-dark room, and I would like to start this conversation with you based on the assumption that your writing likes to deal with the danger of writing, the danger of being alive, being a woman in a world which is hostile to women's body, and the danger of desiring. And so I would like to know, within the trajectory of each of you as writers, how did you decide to address those topics? Because they are not easy subjects, but you do it in a very skillful way with a wonderful text.
Desculpa, gente.
I'm sorry, it happens in live events.
Bueno, entonces, yo quiero que cada uno de ustedes va pensando.
I wanted you to talk about this place in writing, talking about danger of being alive, the danger of wishing, of desiring, but talk about this in writing.
De las cosas que son al mismo tiempo que nos dan miedo, pero que también nos mantienen vivas. Vamos lá.
So repeating the question, we are speaking of literatures that involve a certain horror, awe, but always flirting with issues of recognizing oneself as a dangerous creature or observing desires, be them desires of characters or narrators. And I would like to ask each of you to start this table by telling us a little bit of your writing process and how in this process you got closer to this place, because usually we write and we are uncertain about what our topics, themes, and subjects are. And I would like to ask each of you to tell us how
This takes place, Stephanie, because in a paradox, fear is a very strong emotion. It has to do with strength, but it's also related with frailty, with the fact that we are and we can be vulnerable. Like this storm. This storm makes us feel so small, so vulnerable. If we were not here inside, what would happen? And the strength of the noise, of the rainfall falling down. So I think that with desire, I remember a book by Anne Carson. It is called Eris, Sweet and Bitter, and she goes over Sappho's from Lesbos literature, and reading Sappho's literature, she reflects on how Eris is lacking, wanting. To desire, you need to miss. To want. Wanting is the engine of desire, and desire is vitality. And writing wouldn't exist if we didn't have this willpower, this living willpower of achieving, of growing, of broadening, expanding an emotional territory. But I believe that this desire is the consequence of the fact that we know for sure that we will die, we're mortal. And that is totally connected with death, sickness, pain. And that is why we have to live dangerously. We were talking about this with Alana. We have to live dangerously. Yes, definitely. Live dangerously. There's no other way out. Live with a lot of emotion, passion, but aware of our frailty all the time. If we stop, life stops. So there's nothing else but to coexist with vulnerability.
Bom, eu queria também.
Well, I would also like to ask Alana to speak of her first book, and it is about the story of a trans girl that tells us about her life up to her 30-ish years. And she tells us about her process of self-discovery and self-knowledge, but it is also crossed by many issues, from the presence of neighbors and members of her family, the characters she finds in the books that she loves. All of those people, they compose a kind of personal mythology of this narrator. And I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit how was it to build this narrator and this romance, because there is a very interesting structure in the way you organize the chapters, how characters are introduced little by little, very much like a cobweb that expands itself. We go on mapping her life, and then her life is expanding as our experience as readers also expands. Can you tell us a little bit about this process?
The structure upon which I have built this novel is the structure of the classic Greek epic. It is a Homeric poem, updated, that talks about the travels of a different kind of heroine. It is a circular novel written, and this character is constructed and built throughout her relationships, because I believe that the construction of our intimacy, who we are ultimately are, has nothing to do with what goes on inside and has everything to do with what goes on outside. This main character, due to the way people address her, are violent to her or abuse her, love her, touch her or do not touch her, the city, the neighborhood in which she grew up, and then the neighborhood where she is looking for herself, is the trail of the hero, a growth epic novel in different coordinates. And this is what I clearly had understood in my mind. And my character's development has to do with others, with the rest of the world. Everybody plays a role as an oracle. As an oracle, the creature that offers the revelation to the main character and tells her to go on. And she comes back home to Ithaca, somehow replacing the main or original oracle. It is a very classic epic structure. It is hidden in the layers of modernity, in a pop mythology that serves the purpose of the deities and the intervention of divine, but the structure is classic, very basic. Basic.
Alana agora falou das referências de cultura.
Alana, now touching on the references of pop culture, you were talking about it, and I was preparing myself to talk to you here now, and I was thinking that in Alana's romance, music plays the role of helping the body to discover itself through dance and movement and running, all of this. But in Voladoras, your book, there is a short story on how the sound can disturb a body. It's the story of the twin sisters that make sound experiments. So I would like you to tell me if you think of writing a literature that disturbs the body as the sound is capable of doing it.
Claro, es que siento que el cuerpo no puede ser otra cosa que no sea perturbador. Pero no lo quiero decir.
I don't mean that the body can be perturbing or disturbing. Maybe it's not dark or negative when we talk about sounds. Sometimes we're scared of the sensitive capacity our bodies have. Bodies feel all the time. It's amazing. We even want to silence our body. When we go to work in an office or when we're sitting in the computer, we want to desensitize and purpose, stop moving, because we couldn't be all the time with our sensitivity up here. We would faint, pass out. And I believe that this capacity can be overwhelming in a way, and we need a break. We need a break sometimes. But yes, when I write, I'm interested in trying to explore the sensitive potentialities, what the body says outside the word in a different language. And this is when poetry comes into play, because poetry is an exercise that takes away the word from the commonplace of the word and takes words to a physical, sensitive territory. Music, sounds, what sounds generate in the body. The sound of the storm, Alana, I don't know what you felt listening to the storm, the imagination. You listen, you can't see, but your body feels the sound. You imagine what's going outside due to the sound. It's an anticipation, a vision, a non-visual vision, our mind's vision. Everything that has to do with the body is fascinating, And I believe that in literature, this is what I love, not only when I write, but also when I read, when we read texts that make you feel or give you an experience in the body that goes beyond the textual context of words. And this is what takes place with the music of the text. What do you think, Alana? I totally agree with you, Mónica, and how disturbing this is to inhabit and have a body. I come from drama, and I love Stanislavski. In our body, everything that takes place with us, with ourselves, takes place in our bodies. And we have an experience ever since We feel our bodies because we have a body. Emotions come second. Bodies give you a hint, a signal that becomes an emotion, fear, excitement, pain. Something happens in your body, always in your body first. When we're sad, when we feel anxiety, it is an emptiness. And when you talk about your emptiness, you put your hand here in your chest, emptiness, something that's missing, as if somebody had taken away a piece of your body, the piece of your body that's called tranquility, calmness. And to explore this in literature is endless, because there are no two persons that can feel fear in their bodies in the same way. You don't activate the same body mechanisms for emotions that are common for everyone. Desire, falling in love. Our bodies take precedence. And if you notice that this is the experience we feel and you write it, you stop one moment and think, what's going on in my body when I'm afraid, when I'm scared? I sweat, my heart thumps, I can't listen. I mean, different signs. Our body is an endless source of creation, and it's a filter of stories. Your body tells you a new story every single day. And this is a fantastic treasure when we write. I mean, and it's a treasure that we can take something from. When we read Frankenstein, the terrifying fragments and experts are the description of the monster when the monster stands up, the viscosity of his body and the clumsiness of his broken body. It's terrifying, terrifying, worse than what happens later. The body comes first, and exploiting this gives us literary landscapes that are endless. And there's something else that has to do with what you're saying, Alana. And I just thought about the fact that maybe we're living in a time in which, in our discourse, we say that it's an hedonist or deployment of the body, enjoyment of the body. And I don't think this is the case. I believe that sometimes, when we exploit the joy of bodies, being scared to the experiences of the body makes us avoid these experiences that give us joy, but somehow we make other characteristics of the body invisible, which are scary if we have to face them. It's a paradox, I would say, because the body is a place of conflict. It's a paradox. It coexists in this paradox and conflict. And this is fantastic literary material, because if there's conflict, there's literature.
Eu vou aproveitar esse seu comentário.
I'm going to seize your comment now, because this is very clear in your writings, how much the body is central. For instance, in Mandibula, the experiments made by the friends and the pranks and putting themselves in dangerous situations and the challenges that they pose to themselves, or at the moments they get hurt. But in the short stories of Voladoras, you speak of the body from different perspectives, because you speak of aging, you speak of how society many times see some totally natural aspects of a women's body as something disgusting or mysterious. And so do you use this hygienist logic to enrich your fiction?
No he tenido.
I believe I haven't had this conscious wish to instigate or link. Things that I write don't disgust me, but it's true that talking to readers that have said, reading some of my readers have said, but this is disgusting. How can you relate to that? That's it. They don't disgust me. Nothing in the body disgusts me. I don't have an aversion to the body, but I understood each person has a very different relationship with their bodies. It doesn't disgust me, but it may disgust other people. In my literary work and my writing, there's been a constant exploration of the body, but it has varied necessarily because once you touch the limit of exploration or your own limit to exploration on a certain theme, you have to take a turn, take another path. I feel in Mandible, I was interested in understanding how when desire is extreme, desire to feel things when you live in a repressive place, in a repressive context, which constrains your bodily experience. You go directly like a wave of repression. You go to the other extreme to experience to the full and fear and pain, because this makes you feel your body more your own than ever. This was something that I wanted to explore like this. I think that happens with the body under repression, like it's violent also, as whenever any explosion is violent. But the voladores, I wanted to think of something else. I was interested in thinking how the body that suffers violence, how it refuses or rejects or digests the violence and reproduces it, which is what I believe it's the most terrible part of violence, is that it's contagious, right? Violence is contagious. So a wounded body that suffers violence, the challenge is later to not replicate the violence that you have suffered, or not turn it back, make it a violent emotion that you apply to others. So it's an endless, infinite theme. Each layer, each book is another possibility of exploring that, right?
Né, a sua narrativa.
Alana, in the case of your narrator, she has the issue of absorbing violence that she suffers, and it creates a layer of silence and being distanced from people and family, and it becomes difficult to make friends. And then a moment arrives at which it needs to change. And it is interesting because she says the body became its own wardrobe. And I would like to tell us about this process of repressing yourself, and then the pathways that she finds to come out of the closet. The body became its own closet.
The bodily experience is not even the same constantly in the same person. In some sense, you can inhabit two bodies at once, or you can transform your bodily experience into a very material experience. The protagonist does to protect and hide herself with the same body. It's the opposite. It's to expose oneself, seek oneself, invoking desires, invoking what is being missed, and invoking it in a very urgent, voracious way, in a necessary way. And I think that these are both precisely because the body, everything happens. We can use the body for everything. You can use your body as a closet, and it can be the worst of all, as a closet, because your body, you can't escape your body. There's no way to escape your body. You can abandon your body. You're never going to come back to it again. So I think that this duality occurs in the physical. We've talked about the closet and the interior sense, but the closet can be physical, and you can abandon momentarily the body to give a banquet of validation of needs, a banquet of go and re-inhabit this obscure gray body. I think that to explore this issue, to take the closet outside of the closet and have it on the skin deep, and connect to the need to inhabit the body in a comfortable way, to tell it that you can't postpone, and that you have to feed it in some way or another once in a while. If you do it furtively, although you can at night, hidden away, but you cannot postpone. This experience has to occur. Otherwise, you cannot continue to live. It's a kind of escape or from the closet, the external closet, right? And coming back to recompose this as the lead character does, walking to their house, felt this freedom, the body exposed, putting the body in other people's hands to be able to recognize it, because it can't be done alone. It can only be done almost putting oneself as an offering, touch it, handle it, to feel something, but rebuilding itself, have to change the position, have to change the way of moving, have to change what is worn, and change everything in this sensitive experience, in this body that you inhabit. And during the day, this solar body, which is the one that the person didn't want, their sensitive experience is much less. It's a body that it's in a sense numbed.
Agora eu queria mudar pouco de assunto, porque já, né?
I would like to change the topic now, because there's another thing that draws my attention in reading your work, which is how class issues emerge. We're not speaking only of different bodies, but we're speaking of how those bodies relate to their surroundings. So, for instance, in the case of Mau Hábito, Alana's book, we are speaking of a workers' neighborhood, and the neighborhood is like a very important character in the romance. And in the case of Mónica, Ojeda, in some texts of Mandíbula, there is something else, which is high middle class neighborhoods and society and fashion, and how those places are inhabited by different relations, and also for the fact that there are also half dark rooms in every kind of place. And so please tell me about this issue of shedding lights and shadows on different topics, and topics that would surprise readers both in terms of form and in terms of content, and how do you work with this worldview, which is seen from the perspective of class issues that involve the growing of a trans girl in a given context, and middle class young ladies that are not able to deal with their own desires and end up creating a sect.
Bueno,
A very close friend of mine was faculty in an Opus Dei school in the city of Guayaquil, and this was the worst experience in his life. It was a boys' school. He was a math teacher, and the kids abused him. They would throw garbage on him. They abused him, bullied him, and the institution protected the kids, because these schools in Guayaquil are extremely expensive. Only high class people in my country, in Ecuador, few people, but loaded with money. And when he wanted to talk with the dean or the headmaster said, well, if you can't control your class, that's your problem. And the kids would tell this professor, you work for us. We pay your salary. Our parents pay your salary. And I remember talking about this with my friend, about this horrible experience. And I lived all my life in Guayaquil. Now I live in Madrid, but for the last 5 years, Guayaquil, most of the population is poor. And just a very small percentage of the population is filthy. I mean, it's disgustingly rich. It's filthy rich. And it's feudal, child labor, slavery heritage. The president of Ecuador comes from this tradition. He's a landowner and comes from the tradition of exploitation. So for me, of course, in Jawbone, when I chose these girls to put them in an Opus Dei school, the Catholic sect Opus Dei, a girls' school in Guayaquil, and try to recreate in this atmosphere, because the narrative is not specifically about class division, but in a way it is about social classes, because we can't understand these girls if we don't understand their context, which are the privileges and the limitations, because in an Opus Dei girls, these girls are educated to get married and chat with their husbands. That's why they are educated. But they're educated because they have to be moms and know enough just to chat and have conversations with their husbands. So no sex education, because supposedly they should marry virgin, of course. But of course, they shouldn't explore with girlfriends. Lesbianism is, of course, prohibited. And Jawbone has 2 girls that they never call themselves lesbians, but the sexual exploration desire is between the 2 of them. Desire between 2 girls that don't have the tools. They don't know how to name what's going on, but that's there. So I believe that some way or other, it is impossible to think about desire and the body if we do not think how that body is part of a society with a biopolitics of the bodies, of pleasures, of social behavior. That body, in which contexts? How does this body respond? Which are the discourses? And this is what I ask myself when I write. It's not only a scenario, it's much more than a scenario or the background. It is the makeup of my characters. Often, the stories that take place in working class environments are 2 types. Or they are touristic, you write from a different place, and you talk about the working class in a Pinteresque and a fetishist manner. We have the bourgeois approach and look. And the second is within working classes themselves, from a misunderstood nostalgia, idealization of the working class. Both are unfair and dangerous, I would say, in a way. I wanted to explore what happens with these sorority, mutual cooperation and support, how people help one another because they understand that they belong to the same place, the same environment. And if they don't help one another, they won't make it. But specifically because of this narrative of historic struggle of the working class, of brotherhood and sisterhood, there are difficulties to voice your complaints and to talk about unfairness, and the logics of classes operates within the working class itself and operates within the game that is established between patriarchy and the working class, and women that support the existence of the working class hero are a step below, and her needs are neglected and are not important. And LGTB people are expelled from the class itself. There is a moment in which my novel that there is a very horrible abuse situation, and I wanted to talk about those class mechanisms and those mechanisms that have to do with the 80s, that are characteristic of the 80s, that was the space of the working class man was sacred. Of course, everybody thought that abusing a woman at home was wrong, but at home, the working class man is the king. And in his kingdom, nothing would matter. He would be the king. And the dynamics of power and the games of power take place everywhere and are reproduced in this working class environment. So to avoid them or not to talk about them would be unfair. And if we talk about, how we can confront a situation talking about the working class from resistance and heroism, we should also expose the miseries of working classes as well. And this was important. And the character, the main character, cannot understand herself for better or worse.
So our audience is sending us questions, and I am going to gather some of them and put them together because they are similar. We have here a question to Mónica, asking her to tell us a little bit about the Andean mythology that you used to inspire you in writing the Voladoras short stories, your research for your Andean Gothic. And for Alana, why references to Greek mythology in the construction of your narrator? Something horrible.
Something scary happened when I was writing Flying Women. I was researching topics about the Andean witches with the tabs in my computer, and in another tab, I was updating from Madrid a newspaper of what's going on in my country. Was reading the newspaper from my hometown. So it's a feminist newspaper. I was reading the news of Ecuador, and they were talking about a femicide, an appalling femicide in Cuenca city in my country, in which the head was cut off a woman and was thrown in Tomebamba River. And then I changed my tab in my computer, and in the text I was reading about Andean witches, I see that there's a character called Uma. Uma in Quechua language means head. And these are witches that, according to oral stories, willingly separate the heads from the bodies, and the heads float into the woods and talk to animals. Uma heads do not speak ordinary languages. When they are severed from the body, separate from the body, they talk the language of supernaturals. And when I read in the newspaper the appalling, horrible, violent abuse in my country, I don't live there for the past 5 years now, but it's my country. But this narrative and this understanding, the fears of a very specific community in the Andes, that was it. That was the wow moment. And I understood that I had to write this book of stories, becoming aware of the fact that the oral folklore, the Andean folklore, not only has to do with tradition, but it's furiously present and contemporary, naming violence and abuses that have always been there and reinventing these violence. How can I grab a violent situation and reinvent this violent situation with political tools to see the world not as a jail or a place I can't leave, but rather build a narrative or a story that supports me, and think about narrative in a different way to avoid killing myself. I don't want to kill myself. I have to support it and bear it, so I do it through this narrative. And thinking about the Andean myths that have to do with volcanoes, mountains, earthquakes, landscapes, deserts. Think about this landscape from this furious contemporary approach, not as the mythological, distant. I mean, mythos and logos are not two things. Logos is myth, myth is logos. So, in The Flying Women, I understood that these two words come together. It was fantastic, so beautiful. And this is what writing gives you. Writing gives you the possibility to understand concepts that you wouldn't incarnate unless you write them down.
Me parece.
It's magic. I mean, I could just say I agree, and I could change Andean mythology by Greek mythology, and this would be it, because she said something that I wanted to say. She said what I wanted to say. I mean, when I write, and with everything I do in theater, is to walk the path from myth to logos in reverse. The use of Greek mythology is my personal and childish fetish, because these were the first things I read, Greek myth. And they created the way I understood the world. That is the way that I developed my imagination. I developed my imagination with two aesthetic approaches, Greek mythology and Catholic iconography. And that is the start of everything else. It's how I see the world. And this character, in her environment, which is Madrid, is the city of Madrid, a place with no mythology. There's nothing we can talk about. We have to export other mythologists to make subliminal content in Madrid. So in this neighborhood where she lives with the people that surround her, I mean, as she has the constant transformation fantasy, she projects sublime in anybody to crown her neighbors, the people she falls in love with. She gives them a crown of flowers and transforms these person in goddesses and gods, saints. I do that myself. It's my world of living in the world. Sometimes I look at people and immediately assign them a myth. And I'll die doing this. I mean, this is part of myself. It's who I am, and I like it.
And it's very beautiful the way that she refers to the characters, your narrator, because she speaks of mythological characters as if they were friends, and it's very much the relationship between the reading child and the myths, because the myths became a vocabulary that she has to name a series of things in the world and people in the world and her experience. It's very, very interesting. So we have another question to Mónica, and we have many of, and I'm going to merge many questions into one. So we have questions on to what extent horror and cruelty are ways of trying to deal with the contemporary in Latin America.
Wow. What a difficult question. I'll try to answer. I feel that we can't be able of not being violent and cruel without thinking about violence and the cruelty that inhabits us. There's no way. We should do a very introspective thing, realizing and becoming aware of the fact that it is not otherness. It is not something that we have outside. It inhabits us. Violence, damage people, damage and hurt those we love. And if we don't accept this, the introspective exercise would always take us to this never-ending circle of being violent and hurtful and not being aware. I think this is essential. And I say so. I mean, I don't think that everybody should think about this in literature. Literature has a lot of topics, but me, myself, in my literature, I want to study fear, because I believe that out of the experience of fear is what Simone Weil used the word strength, but referred to violence. Violence is violent, and violence is strong. So if you try to do this exercise in your thinking process, and I do it in writing, if I don't do this, I feel that I cannot control my own hurting capacity, make others suffer. It's an ethical emergency. It's an ethical urgent need to dive in horror, dive in fear, and dive in violence precisely to understand why this is so and what part it takes in me to put a break in my interpersonal life, in my relationships with partners, family, friends, significant others, everything. So if we do not think about our own violences in each of our countries, what we're currently living, the extreme right-wing movements arrival, the murders of green or environmental leaders. I mean, why is this going on? What are the deep roots of all of these situations? I mean, we're doomed to just staying in this path forever. And writing gives me the possibility to think, and this is what fascinates me. We are living in times that are so fast and accelerated, but thought is slow. Writing is slow. You need your time, your years to write a book. It is the opposite of the daily world we live in, and the daily world we're trying to do everything at the speed of light, fast. So writing is the opposite of violence. When you write about violence, horror, and terror, that is the topic. But the fact of writing is the opposite of violence. The first thing violence does is you can't think. If you're being abused, you can't think. But when you write, you think. When you read, you think. And that's the beautiful thing about writing and reading.
Another thing that you have in common is that you cross different literary genres, because Alana writes for theater and literature, romance, and you write short stories and poetry and etc. And Mandibula, your book, has many forms inside this romance, which is this novel, which is one of the things that makes this novel so interesting. And I would like you to tell us a little bit of how does it work for you to go from one genre to the other? Is it related to the topic that you are addressing, approaching? Is it a matter of form? Are there topics that I bring to poetry, or maybe poetry is the way to experiment in a more radical way with form and then see how it reflects in prose? I would like to understand this aspect of your work, please.
Me gusta pensar en mi escritura como...
I like to think that my narrative is the way that we come closer to the different genres as magic. When I write articles for newspapers, I work with my rage, and I precisely organize my rage that takes me exactly where I want to go. Poetry, on the other hand, has been the best way I have found to hide my fears. It is how I can hide myself in layers of metaphors and lose my fears, cover myself in layers. And in my narrative is a mixture of everything else. My narrative is witchcraft. Poetry has given me the music I need to tell stories with a rhythm, with music. My articles give me the possibility to land all the abstraction and my search and my emotions and land all of these feelings. And drama is totally different. Drama is a different liturgy. We write drama knowing that this play will become something else. It is more liturgic than literary when I write drama. But I think that they all feed themselves. But in narrative, I bring everything together. I concentrate everything together with magic skills on the one hand and other skills for the final concoction. Maria Negroni, I like her so much. And Maria Negroni says in a book of essays that she wrote, I don't know if it's called To Think About the Mistake or something like that, a book of essays by Maria Negroni, and she says the following: writing doesn't care about genres. And I write, and I like to read this excerpt from somebody I appreciate, because most writers I like are hybrid. Are hybrid in their writing. They go through different formats and genres in one text. I am not that hybrid. I mean, not as the authors that are hybrid and that I love, but I play. I play and I go through different genres in one text. For instance, in Flying Women, sometimes what I do is to break a paragraph, so a sentence will become a verse. A verse with a very simple graphic thing, like leaving a space and then put it to the right-hand side margin and not to the left-hand side margin, playing with the rhythm of the text, because if this sentence is detached from the paragraph, you read it with a different rhythm, with another timeliness. In Flying Women, there's a story called Earthquake. I wanted this story, it's a very short story. It's a very short story. And is it a short story or a poem? I wanted it to be a short story, but it could also be a poem. I like Anne Carson, Maria Negroni, Castelquignac, essay writer, but these essays are short poems. I enjoyed. In Jawbone, there are different genres. There is an essay, letters, and in Jawbone, I start with the thriller genre because the novel starts with a kidnapping and then it becomes a horror novel. So it's hybrid. In literature, somehow, we always need to have prescriptive writing. Writing should be this, should be that. And no, I like to think about writing in a place of sensorial freedom. How can we liberate freedom if we trap it in formats? Formats decide content, so we want to stretch formats as chewing gum. Just one comment. Because if we want to be successful in this hybrid possibilities, in hybrid genres, which is the most sublime possibility, there's a talent missing, which is to really measure what you're doing. I don't have this talent. I have a very hard time doing this. If I did this, I would write something that would not work. This has to do with talent and literary maturity that I do not possess. But you talk about different genres because you write poetry, narrative, and I love it. Yes, I do so, but I can't mix them together. I can't mix them. I have a hard time doing this. I tried, but I can't. I can't do it. I don't know. I don't have the skill.
Esse livro da Maria Negroni que você...
This book that you mentioned by Negroni is published here in Brazil, and it is named Arte do Erro, The Art of Mistake, in a free translation. There is a question here, Mónica. It's a very specific one. taking into account the narratives of Nefando and your work, Mandibula, how do you see the relationship between game and perversity?
Wow. Creo que a mí lo que me interesa, por eso también.
In Nefando, there is the central game of the novel called Nefando. And in Jawbone, the characters, the girls, play and play that they're creating a sect. And they ultimately create a sect. Something that starts as a game becomes something serious. Because when you're playing, you're learning. When children play, they are creative, you can broaden limits, you can re-signify anything, but up to what an extent? This game that involves emotions, your body, your intellect, and takes you to certain points of your imagination, up to what an extent this place that you find in a game is not a place that you will inhabit for a long, long time. From a literary perspective, I think this is fascinating, because this is what writing is. You start like pretending and playing that you're writing a poem, writing a novel, but then you inhabit this up until the moment in this game is no longer a game, it's something else, something in which you believe in, a totem, a shelter, a dangerous hiding place. And this subject fascinates me. But I never thought about this before writing Nefando. Once I wrote Nefando and Jawbone, and the first novel I wrote, Silva's Defiguration, La Defiguración Silva, I realized that I was going back to a myth. And this is what fascinates me about writing. Writing reveals things about the circle nature of your thinking process. Sometimes you don't realize unless you publish some books, publish some articles, and you find points of coincidence. Your writing process takes you to these circular places, to these places that you go back. And you say, okay, I understand this. It doesn't run through my fingers. I understand what's going on. I see it.
Unfortunately, we are reaching the end of our roundtable, so I have a last question for you. It's also a question from the audience. And based on what we talked in the beginning here, speaking of the body, I ask you, what are your thoughts on this issue of our culture of always needing to go after some kind of perfection in the body, in building our body? Do you believe that this is a matter of transforming the body all the time in an unattainable goal?
I think it has to do with the capitalistic logic of insatisfaction. Our bodies is our only possession. They can take it away from us temporarily, but our body belongs to us. The way that capitalism has found to expropriate our bodies is through unsatisfaction, giving us the message that our bodies are no good. Our bodies need to be something different from what they are. You can intervene your body, you can do a lot of things with your body, but it is part of this permanent insatisfaction. I'm not enough. I don't have enough. I'm always lacking. I'm always wanting. And there's a higher entity, which in this case is capital, we have to pay homage to. And we have to do good by it, to be enough by it. And our bodies can't do it. I mean, it's very easy to create uncertainty and insecurity with your body because we all have our bodies that have physical characteristics that can become a monster, can become something that you need to cut away, or become something that's scary or ugly. It is very easy for the exploiting awareness to put our bodies against us. I believe that we should start to think about ourselves as beautiful monsters. It's very easy to be a monster. I mean, this body perfection rhetoric, our bodies are everything but perfect, because if it's perfect, it doesn't move. If you move, it's not perfect. There's deformity. You acquire other shapes, and our bodies have other possibilities, potentialities, so it's monstrous. So I believe that we should really embrace our bodies as a place of imperfections, beautiful imperfections. I was in Japan some time ago, and there's a word I can't remember because I have super bad memory, but there's a word in Japanese that they have in Japan to talk about how perfect things are almost dead. So what they try to do is detach themselves from perfectum. There is a temple in Nikko that has a great doorway with a column upside down. And I said, oh my God, this is a construction mistake? And no. They tell you that's on purpose, because this fantastic entry, this door, has this upside down column in Nikko, because for them it is important not to reach perfection, because if it were perfect, the door would be near death. It is beautiful but failed. So this detaches the perfection of the structure from depth. So we can see our bodies as imperfect bodies. We wouldn't argue with our bodies all the time if we would embrace them.
So, of course, we couldn't have a better thought to close our table, and I would like to thank Casa, as I would like to thank the organization of FLIP, our sign language interpreters, the entire team, our curators Milena Brito and Fernanda Bastos for inviting me again to be here. All of you, thank you very much. I would like to remind you that the authors will now autograph their books at the bookstore in the square, and our program will continue, and pay attention to the incredible attractions that are spread all through the event, with music, literature, and other performances offered to all of you. Thank you very much.